Welcome to my Decades Challenge. This time we're starting from the 1770s. This is Alexander Morgan. His traits are maker, cheerful, loyal, practice makes perfect, and ambitious. His aspiration is successful lineage. He wants to raise a successful heir. This is his wife, Carolyn Morgan. Her traits are family-oriented, loves outdoors, neat, proper, and practice makes perfect. Her aspiration is big, happy family. She wants to fill her home with lots of children. It's 1770 and the newlywed couple just moved to colonial Brindleton to start a new life. Amongst the talks of the early stages of a revolution, an incident recently happened in Boston that was so-called a massacre. Alexander purchased a bit of land with a small cottage, with his inheritance and his wife's dowry. The purchase had swallowed up their fortune, so they struggled to make ends meet on their own. Alexander went fishing while Carolyn found seeds to start a garden. Carolyn was still getting adjusted to the duties of a housewife. She wanted to start trying for a child, especially since they had no clue what the outcome would be of the revolution. She brought it up with Alexander over dinner, and he had the same idea. Even though they struggled to make ends meet, he was excited to bring up a new heir in the family. Alexander earned the family-oriented trait. They decided to start trying as soon as possible. Weeks of trying went by, and Carolyn wasn't sure if she was ever going to get pregnant. The thought made her nauseous, and she wasn't able to keep her meals down. They bought 2 chickens for the coop to harvest eggs for food. Carolyn took up painting to keep herself distracted, and Alexander took up woodworking to eventually make money from it. That night, during another trip to the bathroom, Carolyn realized her belly had grown a little. She was with child. She was excited to tell her husband in the morning. Carolyn was going to break the news over breakfast, but was interrupted by the morning sickness. She told Alexander she was carrying his child, and he was over the moon. He was excited to meet his unborn child. He hoped for a boy to make his heir. Alexander swept her off her feet with a passionate kiss and promised she wouldn't have to lay a finger until their child was born. Rain or shine, Alexander picked up all of Caroline's household duties. Alexander finally saved enough money to buy a cow. He named her Betsy. She provided enough milk both for their household and to sell in town. Carolyn practiced knitting while she rested. She was not skilled enough to make clothes for the baby she was carrying yet, but she wanted to practice to eventually make baby clothes for her future children. Even though her husband picked up her chores, she still wanted to make herself useful by cleaning up around the house. Carolyn admired her growing belly. She was getting close to being due to give birth. Between hers and his own household duties, Alexander made sure she and the baby were cared for. Carolyn prepared a lot of food for labor. She needed to eat extra for the baby. Before she was ready to pop, she wanted to go out once more to paint. She knew she was going to be doing this less, with her hands full with the baby. Caroline's back and ankles were in pain just from painting, but she persevered until she finished her project. Alexander comforted her and caressed her and her belly. He couldn't wait for his child, hopefully his son, to come into the world. He gave her a massage in hopes of relieving her pain. Carolyn had gone into labor when she went to bed. She ran out of the bedroom to find her husband, as contractions tore through her body. She immediately fell into Alexander's arms and they swayed back and forth together. Her water broke as they swayed. Carolyn sat in the bath to help ease the pain of her contractions. Alexander thought he had his emotions under control, but panic set in when he laid in bed. This was it. he was becoming a father. Caroline's contractions lasted through the night into the next day. Alexander took care of the garden and the animals. Caroline braved the weather and tried to go for a walk to speed up the process of labor. Alexander had a drink to help ease his nerves. Caroline sat on the bed and took deep breaths. It had been almost 20 hours since her labor began. She was getting nervous about the birth. If the contractions weren't bad enough, she wasn't anticipating the pain of actually giving birth. Caroline was worried something could go wrong with her and the baby. Alexander assured her she would be all right. She knew she was getting close. Alexander talked to the baby for the final time, before it would no longer be in her belly. It was time to give birth. She was scared. Alexander had the bedroom set up, ready for her to give birth. He gave her words of encouragement as she cried out in pain. Caroline was exhausted from the pain she had gone through in the last 24 hours. She had to shove her fears aside and finally push the baby out of her body. "It's a boy." Alexander named him after his grandfather William. There was a high infant death rate at this time. Let's spin the wheel to see if the mother and baby survives. We'll spin for the mother first. If the number hits 2, she dies. She survives. Next, the baby. If it hits 2 or 4, he dies. He survives. Caroline gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She cried tears of joy. She was happy her baby came out safely. And Alexander was happy to have an heir of the family. Welcome to the world, William Morgan. Alexander still took care of the garden while Caroline healed from giving birth. He started planting oversized crops in their garden. William did not cry as much as Caroline thought he would. He would only wake up once or twice, a night to be fed or changed. During the day, they put the bassinet outside, so they could spend quality time with him outside the bedroom. They made sure they spent time with each other as well to keep the spark going. William was aging into an infant. Caroline and Alexander couldn't believe how fast the months flew by. William wouldn't be so little anymore. The new parents would need to work harder now to help him reach his milestones. William's infant trait is calm. Alexander and Caroline found him easy to raise. William had looked a lot like his father when he was born. Caroline was excited to start seeing her own features show through after he aged up. William had already developed 2 new quirks. He hated being held, and he was a self-soother. He constantly sucked on his fingers and toes to keep himself calm. William was quick to start hitting his milestones as well. He could already lift his head and roll on his back. And he could also reach and grab his toys. Caroline had fully healed from the birth and went back to working outside. She washed the clothes during one of the few days. The weather was dry. She sometimes brought William outside to work with her so he could have some fresh air. Caroline started painting again during her free time. William slept often, giving the parents time to themselves. They had spent more time working than getting to really know each other since moving to Brindleton. Since William was asleep in their bedroom, they had to sneak to the bathroom and get creative. They were intimate for probably the first time ever. Caroline spent time inside helping William reach his milestones. It didn't take long for him to learn to sit up. He was determined to explore the world on his own. Caroline was helping out with the outside chores when she immediately had the urge to run inside and throw up. Alexander stayed nearby to make sure she was all right. William was ready to try solid foods for the first time. Both parents were really proud of how quick their baby boy was growing up. Alexander knew he'd make a great heir when he was grown. Caroline shared her milestone stories that happened when Alexander worked outside. Later on, Caroline ran back into the bathroom to throw up again, leaving her son unattended. She realized she had a very familiar feeling and looked at the mirror at her belly. She was pregnant again. Carolyn was excited for William to be a big brother, even though he had yet to understand what was going on in the world around him. She told Alexander the big news. He was really happy and showered her with lots of love. He showered their unborn child with lots of love as well. Alexander realized they are going to need a lot more space to raise more children. Carolyn did not allow herself to rest as much as she did the first time she was with child. She needed to take care of William and help him reach his milestones. Although he hit his other milestones quickly, it was taking a while for him to start crawling. Carolyn also had to clean up the messes he made around the house. On nice days, Carolyn brought William outside with her while she washed clothes and worked on the garden. William tried to make friends with one of the chickens. Alexander had begun to build a second story to their cottage, so they could have more room for the children. Carolyn was close to the end of her pregnancy, and she was determined to have William reach all his important milestones before she had the new baby. William finally learned to crawl around, and he learned to stand on his own. Meanwhile, Alexander earned a new trait while fishing. He is adventurous. While his parents were busy, William kept his own company by playing with the only toy his parents could afford to buy for him. Carolyn made sure she got a lot of rest before she went into labor. The following morning, Carolyn tended to William's needs as much as possible. She knew she was due any time now. Alexander did not give as much attention to his wife and his unborn child this pregnancy as he was busy with the outdoor chores and building the second story. Carolyn hoped she would have a girl to put in pretty dresses and raised to be a good housewife. Alexander hoped for another boy to help take care of the garden and animals. Carolyn went into labor. Contractions began to tear through her body, just as they did the first time. Alexander immediately lost his cool and began to panic. He did not have time to freak out though, as he had to take care of his firstborn. Alexander had to set William's crib up in the living room to make room in their bedroom for his wife to give birth. Carolyn was determined for this birth to be quick as possible. It seemed to be the case this time because she suddenly felt ready to push after just a few hours. The couple felt almost unprepared as it happened so quick. She was previously in labor with William for almost a whole day. Alexander held her hand and comforted her through every cry and contraction. He assured her she would make it through this as she did the last time. Carolyn let her instincts take over and sat up as she began to push. "It's a girl." Carolyn named her Charlotte. She thought it was a beautiful name. Time for the wheel of death. If it hits 2, the mother dies. She survives. If it hits 2 or 4, the baby dies. She survives too. Carolyn was elated to have given birth to a beautiful baby girl. They were a family of 4 now. Welcome to the world, Charlotte Morgan. It had been about a couple months since Charlotte's birth. Taking care of 2 babies had proven to be a handful. Charlotte was a lot more needy than William. She woke up often through the night to be fed, changed, and be given attention. Alexander sometimes gave Carolyn a break and took care of both babies himself. Charlotte took a lot of his attention though, leaving William alone and upset. Aside from that, the Morgans had well adjusted to their life in this new dynamic as a family of 4. Charlotte was aging into an infant. Both parents cuddled their newborn for the last time while she was in this life stage. Their second-born was growing up fast. Charlotte's infant trait is intense. It did not look like things would get easier for her parents. William could finally fully interact with his little sister for the first time. Alexander found a gold bar while collecting. He sold it to have the money to nearly finish the second story of their cottage. Charlotte quickly earned her 3 infant quirks. She's a snuggly sleeper. She frequently hiccups, like her brother, and she is an early riser. She still required a lot of attention, especially from her mother. Charlotte never wanted to leave her mother's side, even when she had to go work outside. Carolyn tried to work with her on reaching her milestones, but she took longer than her brother on reaching them. Carolyn was very overworked as a mother, and she was very sore. Alexander gave her messages when he came back in from his outdoor chores. Alexander tried to keep the spark going, but Charlotte started screaming for her mother's attention again. Carolyn hardly had time to herself. Charlotte preferred to nap in her arms rather than in her crib. Both babies had blown out their diapers at once. At that point, the parents agreed they would not be trying for another child until their 2 get a little older. On top of it all, Alexander was coming down with a flu. He had to stay away from the children as much as possible to not get them ill. That meant Carolyn was on her own with the babies. Carolyn kept working with Charlotte on her milestones. She was reaching them slowly, but thankfully she was still within average development. While ill, Alexander had finally finished the new addition to their cottage. It didn't look the best, but they had more space. Unfortunately, their chickens died from old age. Alexander had to buy new ones. Charlotte learned to sit up on her own. She also started eating solid foods for the first time. Both parents were over the moon over her progress. Because of their time apart, being busy taking care of the children, and Alexander falling ill, the parents could feel a slight rift in their relationship. Alexander tried to do what he could as a parent, but he had to stay away from the babies. He had to keep working outside to make sure the animals and garden were taken care of, while Caroline took care of the children, but he felt nauseous and had to run inside to throw up. Alexander was still nauseous, and Caroline was giving Charlotte a nap. When their daughter woke up, Alexander discussed their relationship and their new family dynamic. It was harder for them to have time together. They barely spoke to each other at all since Charlotte aged into an infant. They discussed their baby's development, and they also discussed the ongoing politics. They were being taxed and taxed upon by the English, and people in Brindleton were protesting. They wondered what this would turn into.